So I brought Basho with me. Matsu Basho, do you know him? The great 17th century Japanese poet, author of the famous haiku, breaking the silence of an ancient pond. A frog jumped into the water, a deep resonance. Last week in New Mexico, I went backpacking with two Episcopalian priests in the Gila National Wilderness along the west and middle forks of the Gila River. I was invited by one of my oldest friends, the Reverend Noah Evans, rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania. He was the recipient of a grant from the Lilly Foundation to organize a group of clergy to go hiking for a week, and he invited me to come along. And so, in addition to my sleeping bag, sleeping pad, one-man lightweight tent, 5 days' worth of dehydrated food, change of clothes, and change of socks, and all my other backpacking gear, I brought Basho with me. His text, The Narrow Road to the Deep North, has long been one of my favorites. It was with awe that I beheld fresh leaves, green leaves, bright in the sun. He wrote it as a record, a reflection of a 6-month walking journey he took to North Japan. It's considered by many scholars, poets, and religious practitioners to be among the greatest travel sketches and stories of pilgrimage. Its title is deceptive. The narrow road that Basho travels is meant to have double meaning. It signifies not only the poet's excursion into the north of his country, but also his inward meditative practice in pursuit of enlightenment. In the text, an encounter with pines of the freshest green, their branches curved in exquisite lines bent by the wind, becomes an opportunity to reflect on the poet's own human limits. My pen strove in vain to equal the superb creation of divine artifice, he writes. I brought the text with me because I thought I might turn my hike with Noah and his friend into a small pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is one of the oldest spiritual practices. It's found in many traditions and is practiced in a variety of different ways. Sometimes pilgrims embark upon a specific destination. I once walked a portion of the Camino de Santiago in northern Spain and trod along a route leading to the supposed resting place of James, son of Zebedee and Salome, an apostle of Jesus. Other times, pilgrims simply set off on a journey, hoping to find something of the mystery within. Basho's journey was like that. Margaret Fuller, whose text, Summer on the Lakes, we heard from earlier, was similar. And so was my hike along the Gila. Have you ever taken such a journey? Where you set off for nowhere in particular in the hopes of learning a little bit more about yourself, getting away from the daily distractions, glimpsing something of the dark night sky. The stars are luminous away from the city. And maybe, just maybe, experiencing a deeper sense of connection with the beauty and mystery of the world. It's a well-established spiritual practice within the Unitarian Universalist tradition. Transcendentalists like Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson engaged in it regularly. Fuller, whose name might be less familiar to you than Emerson's, grew up in an early 19th century Unitarian household in Massachusetts and went on to become one of the first professional travel writers. Summer on the Lakes chronicles her sojourn through the part of the country we now call the Rust Belt. In the 1840s, much of it was for people of European descent, largely unknown. The colonial process was really just getting underway, and most of the land remained under sovereign indigenous control. White settlers from the east, with the support of the federal government, were threatening nations such as the Chippewa and Ottawa with genocide. Like many of her fellow transcendentalists, Fuller was disturbed by and opposed to the genocidal practices of the federal government and white settlers. She traveled for several months chronicling the natural beauty of the region. In her writing, she strove to portray the indigenous people of places like Michigan in ways that they were rarely described by other white writers of her generation. As opposed to those who depicted indigenous peoples as either a demagogue or a beast, she tried to portray them as simply as they were, human. Fuller's text, like Basho's, is worth reading. Although her reflections on the humanity of peoples often being cast by other white writers as less than human were a focus, much of the time she celebrated the sublimity found during her wanderings. On the cusps of the Niagara Falls, amid prairie flowers, on the shores of vast lakes, she wrote of how encounters with all the beauties of this region offered her an essential experience of being. Caught up in the presence of a vast and gently swilling pasture of brightest green grass, stretching away from, on every side, behind towards those hills, in all other directions to generous soil, she realizes simply that she has come to understand such moments when she is confronted with magnificence, that it is good to be here. It is good to be here. I found myself having that simple thought often as we walked 26 miles in 4 days. Up the west fork of the Gila, over one side of the Lily Mountain, back down to the other side of the canyon carved out by the Middle Fork, and then along the trail past the Jordan Hot Springs, where we stopped for a delicious hour's soak, up to the point where the Little Bear Canyon intersects with the Middle Fork, crossing over the river some 50 times, and then out to the visitor center, passing another hot spring, this one too sulfur-filled to submerge ourselves in for the completion of the hike. We talked as we tramped along about ministry, the differences between our traditions, our families, and look, there's a wild boar. No, it's a javelina, a squat pig-like pecuary with salt and pepper bristles. It travels in herds, and there, 3 of them are scrambling up the rocks. One foot followed by the other for 26 miles. Mostly we moved in silence, stopping sometimes for water or shade, or to, do you see the way that cactus has grown up in the stone crevice? The one right there with a bunch of bristling spears and a red flower on top? I think it's called a peppercorn. Walking, crossing the river this way, then back over that way, a pool of fist-sized tadpoles, the speckled flash of a trout. All rocks are slippery, and walking. The journey's quiet, Basho as companion. In the utter silence of a temple, a cicada's voice alone penetrates the rocks. There are certain practices that are useful on pilgrimage. I want to share with you 4 that have helped me on my own journeys and led them to be successful. And by successful, the journey is as much inward as outward. For me, any pilgrimage can be judged as successful if it gifts me with a deeper sense of connection to the beauty of the earth and my own inner spark. For you, well, you have to figure out what makes a successful pilgrimage for yourself. That's part of the journey of discovery. The first practice of pilgrimage is to travel with tradition. Tradition offers us guideposts, instructions, information about what might be encountered along the way. We live in a pluralistic society surrounded by numerous traditions, and you have something of an option as to which tradition or traditions you engage with on your journey. One of my traveling companions was quite aware of this. He had started out life as an evangelical Christian before encountering Episcopalianism in seminary. He chose that tradition only to be caught up in a schismatic conflict between the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church of North America. It was a politically reactionary denomination, and he chose to stick with the Episcopalians. The choice he made was a stark reminder for me that in our society, overrun as we are with different information, tradition is always partially a matter of personal decision. Many of you have taken on a commitment to Unitarian Universalism as a matter of personal decision, as a chosen faith, one which you came to as an adult. Others in our society make different choices, and as the events in the recent shooting of Buffalo horrifically have reminded us, those decisions can have consequences. The shooter in Buffalo chose to engage in the white supremacist tradition and acted with deadly force. We can choose differently, and indeed one of the purposes of our religious communion is to guide us into making wise choices as to which traditions we engage with. We can make a choice towards anti-racism, which might be understood as a pilgrimage in its own right, and away from the lethal legacy of white supremacy. On the trail with me, I brought my connections with Unitarian Universalism and Transcendentalism. Attend to all the beauties of this region. Remember, it is good to be here. And my longtime literary predilection for Japanese Buddhist poetry. I felt quite at home, as if it were mine, sleeping lazily in this house of fresh air. Which traditions do you walk with? I hope that if you've come here this morning or joined with us online, one of the traditions you've chosen to walk with is Unitarian Universalism. As someone like Fuller hopefully can remind us, it offers depths that can inspire us, in her words, to open ourselves to the grandeur, somewhat eternal, if not infinite, which surrounds us. My companions walked with the Episcopalian Christian faith. This caused us to see the landscape somewhat differently. Those columns of rock there, wind-carved pillars over 100 feet tall, their colors shift with the light, moving from orange to red, even to white and ashen gray, as the sun peaks and then fades. For me, it's something like a Georgia O'Keeffe painting or a poem out of season but apt by Basho. Far whiter than the white rocks of the Temple Rock, the autumn wind blows. For my companions, it was a reminder of Simon the Stylite, the 5th century Syrian Christian mystic who positioned himself for more than 30 years atop a narrow stone pillar. He climbed up there in an effort to devote himself to the spiritual life, to the pursuit of union with his God, and stayed so committed to his striving toward the divine that he died upon the rock. Christians like to speak of sacrifice when they describe the religious life, a framework that I am suspicious of for reasons that extend beyond this sermon. Nonetheless, the presence of my Christian friends brings to me to a second important practice found in pilgrimage. Do not travel alone. Basho and Fuller both went on sojourns with companions. Basho walked the road to the north with his neighbor Soro, who wanted, like the great poet, to enjoy the views, share the hardships of the wandering life, and find something of religious enlightenment. Fuller traveled with her friend Carolina Sturgis Tappan, another poet and transcendentalist to whom she dedicated her book, writing, "When weary hours a brief refreshment crave, I give you what I can, not what I would." I give you what I can, not what I would. It seems a good motto for travelers together on the Pilgrim road. In both literary cases, the writer's companions share with them the challenges of travel, but there's always a limit to companionship. Each traveler lightens the other's load, but in the end, each takes their steps alone. Sorrow carries some of the things Basho needs with him. Basho carries some of what Sorrow needs. Fuller and Tappan bless each other with company, but both have their separate experiences, made richer by the other's presence, but still, ultimately, their own. For my part, I walked with my Episcopalian friends. The advantages of hiking with others are many. You can spread the load. I carried much food. Noah had the stove and cook set. Our other traveling companion brought with him still other essentials. And you can quicken the camp work. I can purify water while you set up tents. You can make dinner while I find logs for us to sit on. Now, I'm not going to claim that having companions are strictly necessary for a pilgrimage. We encountered more than one person out for a solo hike, but they certainly help. Basho never traveled alone, and he emphasized the enlightening gifts he found in his companions, so much so that he even included their words in his text. A poem for a pair of faithful osprey nesting on a rock. What divine instinct has taught these birds no wave swells so high as to swamp their home? Written by Sorrow, one passage in the narrow road to the deep north reads. Earlier in his book, Basho also reminds us of another important practice of pilgrimage. It's easier if you bring along the right gear. In his opening passage, Basho provides a list of all the things that he carried on his bony shoulders, which were sore because of the load, before remarking, there were always certain things I could not have thrown away for either practical or sentimental reasons. When you hike, you have to carry with you whatever you're going to have for your time on the trail. You have to ask yourself, what is essential? What do I truly need? And then you have to think about what is extraneous. Each item you take upon your bony shoulders weighs down your steps. Do I need 3 pairs of socks when I can get by with 2 and wash one every night in the stream? Is rain gear really necessary? We're in the desert and there's no forecast of rain. How many water bottles do we really need? Should we bring a set of cards to play at night? In the end, what you pack reflects the wisdom you've gained from previous times on the trail and your anxieties. I can get by with 2 pairs of underwear or 2 pairs of socks because we can watch each night. It seems important, however, to pack something possible for every known kind of human ailment. The steak mite kit probably is not all that effective, but it makes us feel better. In the end, though, there are some things you have to bring with you if you want to have a pleasant time on the trail. Good boots are a must. A sleeping roll, a pad, and a decent tent seem like requirements. You have to have food, especially in the desert where someone like me, capable of foraging in the Northeast, is uncertain about what we are going to find or what plants exactly I'm looking at. You should bring, well, the question becomes part of an opportunity for spiritual reflection. What is it that you need? What is it that you merely want? What are you willing to carry? Why? A fourth practice of pilgrimage is twofold and deceptively simple. You have to know your route and be aware that it contains many decision points. With us, we had a map of the Gila National Wilderness, one of those pieces of gear that we had deemed essential. It told us where the trail began, where it ended, where it split, and what we might find along the way. Looking at the map, we always knew approximately where we were and what more we might find along the way. This helped with pacing. We had to walk so many miles each day. And it helped with picking places to camp. If we're going to go past this bend, it looks like there will be a good place to pitch our tents for the night. As we moved along our route, we were constantly making choices. Do we stop here or go on? Should we put our packs down and explore? Is it too early to stop for lunch? Do we have enough water, or should we purify some more? Is this a good spot to rest and try to catch some trout? Each decision we made as we hiked along shaped our journey. It altered what we saw and how we saw it. Exploring Little Bear Canyon, which splits off the main route, mid-afternoon meant entering a twilight space when full sun shone behind us. If we had come earlier, chosen to hurry past another part of the trail, we would have been caught in different light. The trees, the walls, this flower and that would all have been cast with different colors. Sometimes we were only aware that we were making a decision in retrospect. We thought about stopping for the night to camp by the Jordan hot springs, perfect as they were for casting off the trail's dust, but proceeded on because we wanted to see the canyon, Little Bear Canyon, that same day. When we woke up and set out the next day, it soon became clear that the last good place to camp was where we had stopped the night before. And so we ended up finishing our trail a day early. Have you ever had a similar experience where you realize afterwards that you have made some kind of important decision? For finishing the trail a day early was an important decision for our pilgrimage. You realize that you made that decision only when you look back. I certainly have, and not just on the trail. Sometimes the smallest decisions we make can turn out to be the most important. You decide to go out to this party rather than that one and meet someone who alters your life's course. You sign up for this class rather than that one on a whim. They both seem interesting and you pretty much flipped a coin. And then you discover what becomes your career. I suspect that you all have stories that are similar. Walking along a route with a tradition, companions, and the gear you carry, these are 4 practices that I find within pilgrimage. Basho opens his text with the insight that to live is to undertake a journey. Days and months are travelers on eternity. So are the years that pass by. Then he invited his readers into conversation about what more of life's journey could be learned from the intentional practice of pilgrimage. The practices I've named, tradition, companions, what you place on your bony shoulders, and of walking a route, each offer a different lesson for our ordinary lives. I anticipate that you know that already. Imagine that you're here with us today because you are seeking or have found something within the Unitarian Universalist tradition that helps you find meaning in the world. You're probably also here because you're looking for or have found good companions and some insight on what you might carry on your shoulders. And I expect that you're here moving through life's journey, constantly beset with decision points. Come to this service this morning, listen online, or stay at home away from the morning's rain. Tradition, companions, the loads we carry, the paths we select, these are some of what can be learned as we walk along a pilgrimage. What is to be found as we, like Basho and Margaret Fuller, find ourselves upon the road to eternity. May we, like both of them, find ourselves blessed with good tradition, good companions, and all that we need to move through life, ever more aware of the beauty that surrounds us. Amen, and blessed be.